Are we targets of an actual Psy Op? Today you will find out that this is not a theory. If you pay attention, you will understand now why I push privacy and why my teachings are not paranoia. I've told you over and over what drives me. I even gave you snippets of my childhood to drive this point, which is an experience in a dictatorship with zero free speech. And it is not about a political side. And I've repeated over and over as well that this is not a political channel, and that's because privacy is not dependent on politics. It is driven by who's in power and who wants to keep that power. Everyone in power historically has sought to keep that power, and the victim is often all of you and your ability to maintain free thought and free choice. However, having said that, I will call out the side we arbitrarily call the left. They're the ones calling the shots with Psy Ops today. If you want to label me biased, then you're so deep in the matrix that you should just stay there and leave us alone because you will not care about the evidence. Some of you who are so politicized will dispute me and say that it's just a conspiracy theory and that there's no one trying to influence our thoughts. There's nothing external that can influence you. Listen, people, this is not the first time these Psy Ops have been done. It is still being done, and it's very common. It's very stealthy, and it's a scary attempt at control. But it can only happen in environments where someone controls the flow of information so opposition views are not seen. In other words, places with no free speech. I will state it point blank. Big tech is involved in a real Psy Op. But be forewarned that I will tread lightly here as the organization involved is the one that can censor me. Let's get deep into this. Stay right there. Are Psy Ops, psychological operations, real? Can someone actually play with your mind so you can start following some leader or point of view blindly even when it goes counter to your prior opinions? In today's world, can some multi-trillion big tech behemoth do their own Psy Ops on you so they can shape the world to their agenda? I think Joe Rogan recently discussed the Psy Ops angle and was focused more on the media doing Psy Ops. But it's not my idea of a true Psy Op, which to me is an organized, planned, and data-driven affair. In my opinion, mainstream media was more of an instrument to amplify a particular message. In other words, I think they were more of a tool of the Psy Op. Of course, Psy Ops are not a new thing. This term is typically associated with three-letter agencies. Today, places with the most harsh political conditions like North Korea, Iran, Afghanistan, China, Venezuela, Cuba, and so on are places where information flow is extremely controlled. When information is fed into small communities, it is used to build radical extremists. And unfortunately, these extremists are actually just the victims as they are convinced to give their lives up for a cause defined by their leaders. Whether it be the kamikaze pilots of World War II or the Islamic suicide bombers of today, nothing has really changed. Just to demonstrate the power of close communities with close messaging, remember the Jonestown Massacre? That's where cult leader Jim Jones convinced the entire community of 898 to do revolutionary suicide. Or remember David Koresh and the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas, where a whole community was also convinced to commit mass suicide? In the big picture, political messaging often features big in convincing a population to agree to moves which in retrospect may be unethical or inhumane. The Vietnam War was triggered by a Gulf of Tonkin incident that was pushed by three-letter agencies, but that incident never actually happened. How can we forget the WMD threat pushed by Bush and Cheney that started the Second Iraq War? Going back in time, During the Kennedy presidency, the Joint Chiefs of Staff planned a false flag operation to sink a U.S. ship so they could blame it on Cuba. Fortunately, Kennedy disapproved this plan, but then he gets assassinated. Folks, history is filled with lots of events where we're manipulated constantly in never-ending psyops to satisfy someone in power. I bring this to your attention so you can understand that this happens whether Democrats or Republicans are in power. Now let's analyze this in operational detail. There are certain elements to Psy Ops that you need to be aware of. I'm going to tell you about 4 tools needed for effective Psy Ops operations, in my opinion. First, there are psychological techniques that have been learned in the past to trigger people to do certain things they didn't originally intend to do. In benign settings, a salesperson does a semi-psy-op on you to get you to buy a product. For example, a well-understood sales technique is to make a closing pitch and then stay silent. The emotional pressure is built up from that silence, and that elicits a response. When someone is selling you a car, pay attention to these little details because it is something the salespeople are trained in. There are many of these triggers that are known that can cause people to gravitate towards an argument. Other examples are the manipulation of fear. Second, marketing techniques are tools used in Psy Ops. In general, it is about finding the target market. This means identifying a population that is likely to appreciate the message. This doesn't necessarily mean the target person already believes what you're going to push. It just means that from market testing, statistical evidence shows that they are likely to buy your argument. This is an important piece here because some people are not vulnerable to targeting, but it is not essential to target everyone. For example, you can disrupt a population by building a small but loud extremist group. Target marketing is about data analysis. This is not a random probing of a population. So I just want to make sure you understand that this is on scientific evidence. Third, the message has to stand out so you hear it often. Advertisers know that they have to hit you X number of times with an ad before it sticks. This X could be 7 times or 20 times. The point is, it's a measurable value based on statistics. So part of the control of the message is to do message amplification and message suppression, meaning censorship. I explained these 2 concepts in my mind control video. And this then hones the message to reach the target party. Be aware that targeting means that the identities of this population has to be known for the message to be sent. Fourth, in my recent video, I talked about how authority can be used to push a message, and even that alone can be sufficient. As long as authority is established, even false messages can be pushed. This is because most people are compliant by nature. This is a self-defense mechanism. During the pandemic, did you believe all the official messaging to be true? In retrospect, I know from personal experience that many statements said were utterly false and were just done to control opinion. Let's not forget mainstream media here. The independent press, through professional journalists, qualify as an authority. If you can manipulate a group of journalists to parrot a particular message like Hitler, then they're part of the PSYOP instruments. The point here is that there is a sophisticated array of tools that can be used now to do these PSYOPs, and big tech is involved with it to push an agenda. I don't know what the main agenda is. Maybe it is to build a compliant population. I can't attribute things to left or right points of view anymore, since from my knowledge of history, these lines have been blurred in recent times, which kind of proves it's about control. Just to make this very clear, In order for any psyops to work, they need data. So the organizations to fear are the ones with clear possession of your data. The data is used to analyze behavior. They can use a broad data analysis to see who the target markets are based on some behavioral data, for example. But in order to measure the response to messaging, there has to be an identity. They have to know who you are. The identity can then allow the actual targeting. The biggest collector of this data is Google. There's no doubt about this. The next biggest collector is Facebook. But do not exclude the capabilities of Apple and Microsoft as well, and I will address them in future videos. Those of you who are known to Google and known to Facebook intimately are known targets, and the most vulnerable of you will be controlled with fake messaging. Now, I can't tell you specific instances of what messaging each individual gets, since it can be very customized to the target, but I can tell you that it's being done. Also, if you're a target, don't expect that you're being triggered to go outside your political world. Maybe you're just being pushed to radicalized behavior because it makes you stand out, or your weirdness becomes an instrument of influence to turn off others. Now, so far you're thinking I'm a loony and I'm just making these things up, and I truly am paranoid. What I'm going to show you now is an example. It is one of the more well-documented examples of Psy Ops in practice that we can all easily see. This is one company. There are many. Now, I will be direct with you here. I've made a video discussing this topic 3 times now over the years, and in all these past cases, the video was suppressed. So I'm not going to delve into detail. I'll just show you what is, then I will allow you to judge for yourself without too many words. The company I will show you is this. Just so I don't have to battle with the censorship algorithm, I will not even mention their name. You can just read it yourself. This company is an Alphabet partner. They've been working with Google for many years, and one of their earlier projects is called the redirect method. In light of their partnership with Google, this company has access to Google data. So all your interactions with Google, including your search activity, YouTube activity, Gmail, Google Docs, Google Photos, the Google Sensor Vault, and so on, would be available to them for analysis. And just to give you an idea of what this company has been involved with, their early project with Google involved GCHQ in the UK. They sought to identify Islamic extremists in London by their Google data, and then using Google search as their intervention method, they redirected search results to an alternate set of results. Basically, they wanted to suppress what they've identified as extremist ideas in search results and then amplify alternate search results in order to present a different view. While this in itself would not sound suspicious to any Westerner, the problem is that this company is of the extreme left-wing bent. This Psy Ops was used to influence politics. It was used for first identifying people who protest against left-wing ideas and then labeling them as violent right-wing extremists and then subjecting these people to the redirect method. You can research past projects of this company and you will find 100% focus on progressive left ideas, which I'm sure matches those of the Southern Poverty Law Center. This was also used to push establishment ideas during the pandemic. This was used to cut off dissent. The redirect method is so precise that it can map the Google ID of targeted populations to their exact locations on a map. Here I show an example of a map from their older website that I've captured in my prior video. Now, this company has expanded its approach and commercialized this Psy Ops, and I will call it that since there is no other more accurate description of things like the redirect method. But just to show you their intent, let's read the section on the website called Interventions, which is really the Psy Ops part. Look at this little chart. It is showing that their source of data is all of your data that can be found on the internet. Obviously, it has to be identity-based or it will not be useful. Then the next category is labeled Unique risk assessment algorithms. This, of course, is the data analysis step that I've already said is being used to classify people into target populations. And then further to the right, it has a fork, and the first part of the fork says actionable data insights, which is the research phase. And the second part of the fork is interventions to end harms. This is when the psyops actually begin. Now let's look at the terms described in their actual intervention process. Disruption. Of course, you already know the kind of disruption that is done here: suppression or censorship. And you also know what counter messaging is, which obviously is targeted message amplification. Then there's this service and support connection, which is a nice way of saying that this intervention now includes parties like the government, someone to step in and physically knock on doors, or someone in a platform to disable an account. You can check the description for the link to this site and study it yourself, but I think you should be getting the point now that I'm not kidding you about actual psyops running today. This company, which I'm sure is one of many, is selling their services to others, and I would venture a guess that their clients would likely be other tech platforms, governments, and three-letter agencies. Anyone heard of the new social media Twitter clone called Blue Sky? This was started by Jack Dorsey of old Twitter. That's where all the left-wing progressives flocked to after the election. You can see the extreme censorship there with any right-leaning point of view, but that company has only 20 employees. There's no way they can do all the censorship manually. Could they be a customer of this Psy Ops company, or maybe another competitor? There are other techniques, by the way, other than a redirect method or censorship. Other interventions include automatic bot counter messaging in user comments. It's really hard to trust what you see. Who is vulnerable to these psyops? If you read the criteria for identifying targets and doing interventions, it should be obvious that the target is the normie. The normie in love with their iPhone 16s, the people who know nothing about privacy and don't realize that every click on the internet is tracked. The people who are oblivious to the Google ID or the Facebook ID or the Apple ID that can be used to identify you over the internet. Folks, it should be clear that those in my privacy community are immune from being targeted. If you're already a conformist because you've been turned in the past, or you're such a normie and in this case already left-wing per their qualification, then obviously you will be left alone. You're not in the target market. At least not today. Again, depends on the current objective. The target folks are those who resist the ideas of big tech. If you're a regular watcher of this channel, you know that I give you many strategies that all contribute to making you all disappear from big tech records. Remember that though this is specifically a big tech threat, this can be used by a government in power if they conform to big tech's agenda. In which case, then it is even more dangerous because government data and government intervention can be added to increase the threat. This has happened during the Biden administration in a big way. But with the change this election cycle, it would appear that big tech and media are no longer aligned with government. This bifurcation for the next 4 years is important. It weakens big tech. So keep an eye on this and see what disruptions and interventions big tech might make to gain their power back. But this opposition of ideology is good for us in general. It limits the abuse. By the way, there are right-wing bias organizations that do similar things to this company. One known example is Palantir. Palantir staff were connected to the Cambridge Analytica debacle, so this idea of psyops was tried by the right too. Be careful, a pro-establishment right-wing government could side with right-wing big tech organization like Palantir. I'm especially worried about neocon politicians who lean in this direction. Trump is anti-establishment, so he might disrupt this. We'll see. Let me just make a closing comment here. The elite of Hollywood called the people who voted for Trump uneducated, ignorant, zucking morons. This included names like Sharon Stone, Alec Baldwin, Ronnie Chang, George Takei, Rob Reiner, Stephen King. They're supposedly the smart ones. But this supposedly ignorant bunch of voters were able to resist the Psy Ops. Sounds pretty smart to me. And since this group of elites did not seem to be aware of the Psy Ops, then I would question their own intellect, or maybe they're in the inner circle. So watch out, my friends. Protect your personal information. This will depower their control and their ability to do the Psy Ops. Folks, this is the sponsor section, and I sponsor myself, and your support sustains this channel. As I discuss in this video, the antidote to any party trying to control us is to have unfiltered information flow through free speech and keeping our data and our identity away from big tech. Big tech is the threat here, and our protection is by denying big tech our data. This is privacy. I started a company to provide tools that can protect our privacy. Recently, we created a new phone model called Brax 3, and this is now on pre-order on Indiegogo. This phone is invisible to big tech. You can support the project there, and I'll put the link in the description. I also have other products that are important in the privacy battle and can be found on my platform, Brax.me. In addition to Brax 3, we have the Google phones in our store based on pixels and are available today. We have the Brax virtual phone, which allows you to add new phone numbers that can be used to hide your identity online. We have Brax Mail, which is an incredible service allowing you unlimited aliases and multiple domains and obfuscated data to make your identity disappear in emails. We have Bytes VPN, which is a necessary tool to hide your IP address, since that is also used to identify you. All these are on my store on Brax.me. Brax.me is a community of privacy enthusiasts, and the store is available when you join the site. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.